I always thought my mother was the quiet kind, soft-spoken, polite, always putting others first. But after she passed, I found something she never meant for anyone to see. A small wooden box hidden behind her sewing kit. Inside was a diary and a cassette tape. That night, I sat in the dark and pressed play. I wasn't ready for what I was about to hear. My dear child, her voice trembled on the tape. If you're listening to this, I'm gone. But there are things you need to know. What followed shattered everything I believed about my family. My mother had lived a life of fear. Behind every smile was pain. Behind every holiday photo, a bruise carefully hidden, and the man I called Dad. He wasn't my father. He was her jailer. She had tried to escape once, and she almost lost me because of it, but what broke me was learning who helped her cover up something that could have destroyed our entire family. Someone we all thought had died years ago. Why did she stay? Why didn't she tell anyone? And what was the real reason? She kept all of this buried until after she was gone. If you've ever loved someone who suffered in silence, if you've ever wondered what your parents never told you, then this story might stay with you for a long, long time. Before we begin, I invite you to subscribe to this channel. That way, if life pulls you away, you won't miss the rest of this story or the many others we share that touch the heart and reveal hidden truths. Now, I ask you, what would you do if the person you trusted most had lived a secret life of suffering to protect you? Let's begin. Growing up, I thought we were just a quiet family. Mom was always tidy, her hair pinned up neatly, her apron spotless even when she was baking 6 pies for Thanksgiving. Looking back now, I realized there were signs. But as a child, you don't see warning signs. The porch, I believed her. I remember her hugs. And she always said, "Don't worry about me, sweetheart." I didn't even question it. I just hugged her and said it tasted great anyway. Even the neighbors said, "Your mother's a saint." Birthday wine and sang Elvis Presley with a wooden spoon as a microphone. I thought it was the funniest thing I'd ever seen. Even Dad cracked a smile that night. Still, she never let us take family photos unless everything was perfect. "Collar's crooked," she'd say, gently smoothing it down. She wanted life to look peaceful, even when it wasn't single quotes too sometimes. She'd sit by the window for hours, just staring at the trees. I asked her once, "What are you looking at, Mom?" She smiled and said, "Just making sure they're still standing." At 13, I started noticing little things. How she never stayed on the phone too long once because she never let me feel unloved. She made lunchbox notes with little hearts. She tucked me in every single night with the same phrase, "Sleep safe, my star." But even stars need more than light to survive. One day in high school, I came home early and heard voices in the kitchen. Dad was yelling, frozen, not knowing if I should run to her or pretend I hadn't seen anything. She turned around and smiled. A weak, worn smile. "Hi, honey. Want a snack?" She made me grilled cheese that day. Burnt on one side, but she still cut it into hearts like nothing had happened. Was enough to patch the cracks. And maybe, for her, it had to be. Because when you're living in fear, you cling to small joys like lifelines. Now that I think about it, my mother never really lived. She survived gracefully, quietly, beautifully, and I never asked why, until it was too late. It all began the day we cleaned out Mom's house. She had passed quietly in her sleep, wrapped in her favorite quilt, the one she made the winter after I was born. There were no dramatic hospital scenes, no long goodbyes, just a cold morning and a house full of silence. Grief is strange. It doesn't come in loud sobs. Sometimes, it just sits beside you while you fold sweaters that still smell like her perfume. I had promised her I'd handle everything, so I sorted through her closets, her jewelry, her stacks of neatly labeled spice jars, everything in its place, just like her. Then I found the box. It was tucked behind a stack of old blankets in the attic, under a layer of dust and time. A small, wooden box with a brass latch, unlabeled. Locked it felt sacred, like something I wasn't meant to find. The key was taped to the bottom. Typical Mom. When I opened it, I expected maybe love letters or baby pictures. Or maybe even one of those open when you're older notes. But what I found was far more than I ever imagined. Inside was a worn leather journal, edges frayed, pages yellowed. Next to it, a cassette tape labeled in her handwriting. "For when you're ready," my fingers trembled. It felt like opening a door she had carefully kept shut her whole life. I sat on her old rocking chair by the window, the same one she used to rock me in, and I started to read. The first page was gentle. "Today I made your favorite soup. You smiled when you smelled it from the hallway. Sweet memories." Her voice, even on paper, felt like a hug. But then the tone changed. "I wore long sleeves again today." He asked where the bruise came from. I said I bumped into the door. My heart dropped. I flipped ahead. I told myself he didn't mean it, that it was the stress. that if I just kept quiet, he'd calm down. Each entry peeled away the version of my childhood I thought was real. Each word painted a different truth. She'd been hurt repeatedly, silently sometimes. She wrote as if she were talking to herself. Other times, it felt like she was writing directly to me. I hope one day you'll understand why I stayed. I closed the journal, tears blurred the ink. I needed air. I needed her. But all I had was her voice, still waiting on that cassette. Tape. So I dusted off Dad's old tape player from the garage. It took a minute to remember how to use it. I had to smack it twice to get the speaker working, just like Mom used to do when it jammed. That made me smile a little. Funny how grief and laughter can share a moment. I pressed play. Her voice filled the room. Soft, hesitant, my sweet child. If you're listening, then I'm gone. And it means you're ready to know the truth. I held my breath. There are things I never told you, not because I didn't trust you, but because I wanted you to grow up unburdened, free. She paused. Even in death, she paused to protect me. You might hate me for staying with him. You might wonder why I never ran. But there's so much more to the story than bruises and silence. I couldn't stop crying. I wanted to scream. To go back in time. To hold her hand. To ask her everything. But all I could do was listen. I didn't know how long I sat there listening to her voice play through that old machine. The tape crackled at times, the sound fading in and out like a ghost whispering through walls. But her words were clear. She had started recording during a time when, as she said, I needed to speak out loud because writing wasn't enough. I met him when I was just 19, she said. He was charming. Everyone liked him. Even your grandparents thought he was the perfect match. Then her voice dropped. But perfect men don't make you feel like you're always one mistake away from being punished. She spoke of their early years, how the control began slowly. He didn't like her seeing friends. Then he didn't want her wearing certain clothes. Then he started raising his voice, and one day he always said he was sorry afterward, that he loved me, that I made him do it, and I believed him. My chest tightened, she continued. I got good at covering things. Makeup, long sleeves, smiling when people asked. If I was, okay, she chuckled softly. I became an actress, didn't I? That laugh, it broke me. She wasn't remembering with bitterness. She was remembering with resignation. Like someone who had made peace with being invisible, she told stories I had never heard. The time he threw a plate against the wall because dinner was cold. The time she locked herself in the bathroom for hours after he pushed her down the stairs. The night he threatened to leave and take me with him if she ever spoke out. That part made me gasp. She had stayed. Because of me. I used to stand by your crib, she said, listening to you breathe. I told myself, if he hurts me but not you, I can survive. I had no words. Only tears. How could I have lived under that roof and not known? Then she shared something that stopped me cold. You once asked me why I never danced. You were 5. You said, Mommy, why don't you spin around like the ladies on TV? And I told you I had bad knees. Her voice cracked. The truth is, he broke one of them. I sobbed, not just for the pain she endured, but for the joy she had to fake. The light she had to dim. She had danced once before him. She had dreams. A scholarship to a dance school she never took. He didn't want her dancing, or laughing too, loud or existing in any way that wasn't under his control. And yet, she found ways to stay human. I planted tulips in the back garden, she said. Every spring when they bloomed, I told myself, I'm still here. That image, my mother kneeling in the dirt, hands bruised but planting flowers, it's something I will never forget. And then, like a flicker in the dark, she added, but one day, something happened, something that changed everything. I sat up. I could hear her breathing through the tape, a long, hesitant inhale. I don't know if you'll ever forgive me for what I did next. Then the tape clicked off. It had run out, and just like that, I was left in silence again. But I knew there was more, so much more. I turned back to the journal. There were pages I hadn't read yet. I wasn't sure I could handle them. But I had to try, because once you open a door like this, you can't pretend it never existed. I turned the page in her journal. The ink was darker here, the strokes of her pen more frantic, as if her hand was shaking while she wrote. I had packed the bag a week in advance, just a small suitcase hidden under the sink, with some clothes, diapers, and your favorite stuffed bunny. I swallowed hard. She was writing about me, about us. I waited until he left for work. He always left around 7:15, if I timed it right. I had 20 minutes before he realized he forgot his wallet or came back for something. That morning, the air felt thick. I couldn't breathe, but I told myself, just get to the bus station. I imagined her then, young, scared, with bruises hidden beneath long sleeves, holding a baby and a bag, praying no one would stop her. She wrote about running down the street, heart pounding, every step feeling like the pavement might break beneath her feet. I didn't look back. I couldn't. If I saw our house again, I might freeze, or worse, turn around. She made it to the station, bought a ticket with crumpled cash she had saved from grocery money. Asked the clerk what was the next bus out of town. He always said I'd never make it far, that no one would take me in, that I was nothing without him. But that day, I chose to believe I was more. Her voice echoed in my mind. This wasn't just survival, it was rebellion, it was hope. But then, the page shifted. Her tone changed. I was 2 minutes from boarding when I heard his voice. I froze. I don't know how he found me. Maybe he followed me. Maybe a neighbor called. Or maybe he just knew. He grabbed my arm, pulled me so hard I nearly dropped you. You cried? I cried. And then he whispered in my ear, if you ever try this again, I'll take her. You'll never see her again. I pressed a hand to my mouth. She had tried. She had fought. But fear is a cruel jailer. He smiled at the station manager. Said there was a misunderstanding, that I was tired, overwhelmed, and everyone believed him. Of course they did. He looked clean, calm, charming. She looked like a woman on the edge. That night, he made me sleep on the floor, said it was punishment, said I needed to be reminded of my place. I curled up beside your crib, and as you slept I whispered, someday, baby girl, someday we will both be free. I couldn't hold back the tears, because she didn't stay for herself. She stayed. For me, even when the world wouldn't listen, even when her body was bruised, her spirit shattered, she stayed. That's not weakness. That's a kind of courage I'll never fully understand. And yet her story wasn't over. At the bottom of the page, in tiny, trembling letters, she wrote, I began writing letters to myself, little notes I'd hide in books, drawers, between recipe cards, reminders that I was still me. That detail broke me. She couldn't escape physically, but mentally she planted seeds of herself everywhere, in hidden notes, in bedtime stories, in quiet smiles she gave me when he wasn't looking. She was surviving, one secret at a time, and somehow, even in that darkness, she managed to leave breadcrumbs that would one day lead me back to who she really was. The next envelope was thinner, delicate, almost too fragile to open. It was sealed with a strip of yellowed tape, and on the outside, in faded ink, it read, For when the truth is safer than silence. My hands trembled. Inside was a single sheet, folded 3 times, each crease marked with time and pain. And then I read it. You deserve to know who you are. I stopped breathing. The man who raised you, the man you called Dad, was not your biological father. The room spun, no. It couldn't be. You were born from love, not violence. The words blurred, but I kept reading. Before him, before the nightmare, there was someone else. His name was David. We were only 20. He was kind, gentle. We would lie in the grass and dream about the future. He never raised his voice, never raised a hand. He made me feel safe in a way I didn't know I needed. She had loved someone. Before everything turned to ash, when I found out I was pregnant, we were both scared, but excited. He kissed my belly every night, talked to you like you could already hear him, but then came the accident. A rainy night, a speeding truck, and just like that, he was gone. Tears ran down my face. She lost everything, her love, her partner, her future at the funeral. I couldn't stop shaking. Everyone told me to be strong for the baby. But how could I, when my heart had just been buried? And that's when he entered her life, the man I thought was my father. He offered help. Said he knew David, said he'd make sure I wasn't alone. At first he was kind, patient, supportive. Of course he was. They always are at first. But once the baby was born, everything changed. He didn't like that you looked like. David didn't like that you reminded me of someone better. He insisted you call him Dad, that you forget anyone else ever existed. I felt sick. My childhood memories twisted in my mind. The man I feared. The one whose footsteps made me flinch. The one who told me I was ungrateful, too loud, too emotional. He wasn't even my real father. He was a shadow cast over a life that was supposed to be filled with light. I wanted to tell you for years, but I was afraid. Afraid of what he'd do if he found out you knew. Afraid that the truth would hurt more than the lies. But you need to know this, sweetheart. You were born from a moment of pure love. You were wanted. You were cherished. I wept not just for the mother who lost the love of her life, not just for the child raised in fear, but for the truth that had been buried for decades. Buried but not forgotten, because now it was mine. This truth changed everything, and somehow nothing. I was still me, but suddenly the pieces of my life rearranged themselves. The way she would sometimes look at me when I laughed, it wasn't fear, it was grief, because I reminded her of him. The way she would flinch when he raised his voice. It wasn't just her pain, It was the echo of a life that should have been different. And now I understood why she wrote these letters, why she kept this secret, why she stayed. Because even after all the heartbreak, she still believed I deserved to know where I came from, to know I was loved, even before I took my first breath. I thought I had uncovered everything, the letters, the truth about my real father, the years of silent pain. But there was still one question that haunted me. Why didn't she ever leave him? Why did she stay and stay silent? I couldn't let it go. So I returned to her old neighborhood, the one with cracked sidewalks, overgrown hedges, and the red mailbox that still leaned slightly to the left. Mrs. Carter still lived next door, 84 and sharper than a tack. She wore pink curlers and a housecoat with flamingos on it. "Didn't think I'd ever see you back here," she said, squinting through her screen door. "I have questions," I said. She opened the door wider without a word. We sat in her sunroom. Sipping sweet tea from mismatched mugs, she watched me carefully, then said, "You're here about your mother." I nodded. "She was the bravest woman I ever knew," Mrs. Carter said, "but not in the way people think of bravery. Not loud, not fierce. Quiet bravery. The kind that bleeds behind closed doors." I felt a lump in my throat. "She used to come over with bruises hidden under makeup," she continued. "Always smiling, always polite, telling me she tripped on the stairs. Even when we both knew that house didn't have stairs." I managed a sad chuckle. "She stayed for you," Mrs. Carter said. "That man, he made her believe if she ever left, he'd take you away. Said he had money, lawyers, power." I froze. She wasn't afraid for herself. She was afraid he'd win custody. She couldn't prove anything, I whispered. "She kept records, dates, photos, but she never used them," Mrs. Carter said. "She said if I pushed too hard, he'll come for her. So instead, she waited. For you to grow up, to be strong enough to stand without her arms around you." I stared down at my tea. It had gone cold. "She gave up her own life," I said. Mrs. Carter leaned forward. "She didn't give it up. She gave it to you." That silenced me. "She stayed quiet, not because she was weak," she said, "but because her silence kept you safe." I closed my eyes, the tears coming to easily now. All those years, I thought she was passive, afraid, but she was fighting a war in silence. Mrs. Carter gave a small smile. She used to say, "One day, my girl will find her own voice, and when she does, it'll be louder than anything he ever shouted." I broke then, fully, completely there. In that dusty sunroom with lace curtains and a cuckoo clock stuck at 2:17, I cried for my mother, for the love she carried in silence, for the sacrifices she never spoke of, and for the voice she'd given me. Mrs. Carter placed a wrinkled hand on mine. "She never stopped loving you," she said, "not for 1 second." We sat there a while longer, saying nothing. Just two women, one old and one finally understanding, connected by a woman who had been silent, but never invisible. As I left, Mrs. Carter called out, "Next time, bring a pie. Your mama always brought apple." I smiled through my tears. "I'll bring 2, I said. After days of sorting through Mom's belongings, I found something strange tucked away in a drawer-worn envelope with no return address. The handwriting was unfamiliar. Inside was a letter. Folded carefully, it read, "To the brave woman who taught me strength in silence, you are not alone." I felt a chill. Who was this? The letter didn't have a signature, but the handwriting matched some of the notes hidden in Mom's journal. Someone had been reaching out. Someone had been watching and helping. I dug deeper, old phone records forgotten. Letters, faded photographs of a kind-looking man who never appeared in any family photos. His smile was warm, his eyes gentle. Mom had never mentioned him, but he had been there. Mrs. Carter helped fill in the gaps. "Your mother wasn't alone," she said softly. "There was a man, Mr. Reynolds, who lived a few blocks away. Quiet, humble, a retired schoolteacher. He noticed the bruises, the fear, and he did what most wouldn't. He stayed." I pictured him, an old man with a gentle voice, a steady presence in a turbulent storm. Mrs. Carter smiled sadly. He'd bring her groceries when her fridge was empty. Fix things around the house she couldn't. Sometimes he'd watch you. When she needed a break, I imagined those small acts of kindness, a warm meal, a listening ear, a borrowed tool. Invisible threads of support that kept her going. "But why hadn't Mom told me about him?" Mrs. Carter explained. "She was proud. She didn't want to seem weak. And Mr. Reynolds never asked for thanks. He believed what she needed was dignity." This quiet hero had been her lifeline. Then, in a twist that surprised me, Mrs. Carter shared one last secret. "There was a day when things almost went too far. Mr. Reynolds called the police after your father's worst outburst. But your mother begged him not to press charges. Why? Because the last thing she wanted was more chaos. She told him, If he goes to jail, who will protect my daughter? She was trapped in a web of fear and love. I sat back, overwhelmed. Here was a man who tried to be a beacon, and a mother who fought her own battles silently. Neither perfect, both courageous in their own ways. That letter, those hidden acts of kindness, they changed everything I thought I knew. Because sometimes, the strongest love isn't loud. It's quiet, steady, invisible to the world, but unbreakable. I stood in front of the old house, the same one where I had cried as a child, hidden in closets, listening to shouting. Now, it was silent. But ghosts don't make noise. They wait. My father, no. The man who raised me, but not my father had. Aged, his hair thin, hands shaking. Yet when he looked at me, the coldness was still there. The same coldness that made Mom flinch. "You've got some nerve showing up here," he muttered. "I didn't come to argue. I came for truth. And to return something." I laid the letter on the table, the one Mr. Reynolds wrote. He glanced at it and scoffed. "Old fool, always meddled. Your mother was dramatic." That word, dramatic. But I stayed calm. "You broke her, and then blamed her for shattering." His eyes narrowed. "You don't know the full story." "Then tell me." Silence. Finally, he said, "She could have left. She stayed. She stayed because of me," I replied. "She was protecting me from you." His face twitched. "She was weak." "No," I said. "She was stronger than you'll ever be." I turned to leave. But before I reached the door, he said something that shook me. "She left a will. You should read it. Maybe then you'll understand just how much she lied." I didn't expect that. A week later, I sat in the lawyer's office. A simple manila envelope. Her handwriting, my name. The lawyer opened it and began to read. "To my daughter, you always saw me as fragile. But I was never fragile. I was surviving. Everything I did to keep you safe. There were days I wanted to run, days I wanted to give up, but I stayed for you." Tears welled in my eyes. "I know your heart is full of questions. That's why I left this house to you. Not as a burden, but so you can reclaim what was taken. Turn pain into peace and maybe forgive." The lawyer paused, then handed me another sealed letter. I opened it, expecting more tears, but inside was a check. A large one. Enough to start over, and one sentence. "This is from Mr. Reynolds. He left it for us before he passed. He believed in second chances." I broke down. Not because of the money, but because a man I never knew had believed in me, in her, and left behind a legacy of quiet love. Weeks later, I returned to the house. Alone, I walked through each room. Whispering her name. In the kitchen, I left a vase of fresh flowers in the hallway. I hung a photo of her smiling finally free, and in the living room, I sat in silence, letting the past breathe. Not everything broken needs to be erased. Some things need to be remembered. As I watched the sun set through the cracked window, I whispered, "Mom, I forgive you, and I hope you forgive yourself."